Hey, what's going on? This is bekbrace with a new video.
Hey, what's going on everyone? This is bekbrace. Hope you're all doing well. In today's video we're going to see how we can create My Budget app. It's something like an expense tracker app. So it checks what cash inflow comes in your pocket and what cash outflow goes out of your pocket, and tracks also the balance. So if you have a positive balance or a negative balance. We're creating this app in a very simple way using only vanilla JavaScript. We're not using anything like jQuery or Bootstrap or any of that. Just simply a file for HTML, a file for CSS, and a third file for JavaScript. It has very basic functionality. I'm pretty sure that you can improve upon that, so you can add more functionality to this app, but for the moment I'm pretty okay. I'm pretty satisfied with this. So let me show you what this app does exactly. So we have a description here, so let's just say that we have a salary, call it main salary, and before we do that, if I will not enter anything and I'll click add transaction, I will have an error message. Please enter description and amount for 5 seconds, and it disappears using the set timeout function. So this is that. And so let's say we have a main salary of 10,000. I don't know, anything. Add transaction, and we have inflow $10,000 in green, and the history here we have the main salary plus 10,000, and we have an X button, like a close button, just if you want to delete that, and everything is persistent to the local storage. I mean, if you close the app and reopen it, you will still see the information that you've entered. Okay. Let's enter something like an expense, for example. So let's say kids school fees. We have paid 2,500. Add transaction and kids school fees. Oops, you see I didn't make minus, because if you will enter in expense you need to enter in minus. So let's say school fees minus 2,500. Okay, add transaction. School fees minus 2,500, and we have everything is tracked here. Balance 7,500, inflow 10, outflow 2,500, and balance 7,500. And if we will add on the expenses, minus 3,000, add transaction, and it adds here, and the history continues on and on and on. Okay, so this is the main functionality of that app. I'm going to show you now how we can create first the UI. I'm pretty sure you can do that on your own. I will leave, of course, the code in the GitHub link as usual. You can download it and you can check it. You can modify it. You have my total permission to modify, to do whatever you want in that. Some areas that need to be improved though is, for example, the balance. If it reaches, for example, you can set a limit, an alert limit. So if the balance will reach, I don't know, 1% of the total salary, not 1%, let's say 10% of the total salary, we can get, like, we can make JavaScript create like a message, an alert message, to say that alert, you have reached the limit, or be careful, you need to be more careful with your expenses, something like that. I don't know what else. For example, we can increase just to not let only the outflow, like expenses, we can make also investments. We can make some segments even in the inflow. We can make it like main salary, and if you have any other income source, like if you're trading in the stock market, for example, or if you got gain on selling a piece of land, something like that, we can really dissect that and make it more complex. We can even go further. We can create a chart, and showing the movement of the inflow and the outflow, things that you can see on online banking stuff, with a chart with the stats going up and down, or a pie chart, for example. Anything we can improve upon the app, like I said, and we can create more interesting stuff. But this is really basic, and you can improve upon it, and feel free to show me if you would like. Okay, so now let's jump into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so first of all, let's check our index HTML.html. So we have our boilerplate, we have the title, which is here, my budget app. In the body we have a container that it contains everything inside this main frame. I have here a paragraph with error message because we need to enter the error message, and I've put it above my budget, so it will be shown here. Next I have the h1 with class of title. As you see, everything, and I'm using also font awesome because I've just put this, and I'm just putting this rotation thing just to make it more interesting. It doesn't really do anything, but you know. What else we have? So that's here, the new entry with h3. Then we have a form, and inside the form we have label and we have input. So in the label, first label, set label description amount, plus and minus, and inside the input here I just added some attributes like type, ID, text, type text, ID text, and on focus, because we're going to use it for this effect. When you click it, it expands like that, from 200 pixel to 300 pixel, I think, something like that. I don't really remember the numbers. And placeholder, okay, enter text and enter value. And after we have a button, and this button, of course, we are stylizing the button inside the style.css. It's a huge file, the style.css, by the way. I didn't mean to be huge, but every little thing I wanted just to craft and do in a nice way. By the way, I don't know, what do you think about the background color of black? I don't know, for me it's okay. Yeah, so we have the button of add transaction. Then we have another div with a class called income expense, and inside that we have inflow, the outflow, and the balance, like you see here, with 3 small divs. Each has a class of BG light. Should be BG background dark, not light, but yeah, okay. By the way, let's change that to be more logical. I'll change that quickly. Dark. We'll save that, of course, will disappear, and we need to locate that here. BG light, dark. There we go. So yeah, that's all. Then the history, we have a history with the h3 tag, and below that we have a dynamic unordered list, because actually these are inserted into the DOM in JavaScript. Okay, so we just put it here with an ID and a class, and that's it. And you link your JavaScript file. Okay, this is HTML simply. And inside the style CSS, I'm not going to go through everything in style CSS, but basically we have here Google Fonts, just to use this font, which is called Montserrat. I liked it, that's why I use it, specifically in this application. So display flags, justify content, all that kind of things that I'm pretty sure you know. The title, the container, you will see every small element here. I just try to craft really based on my own preference. This is my own design, the colors and the buttons and everything. Okay, so So you have everything here stylized using the classes or the ID. Okay. Alright, so this is that for the style CSS. Now the fun part starts with the JavaScript. Now if I will make like that and I will comment that out, everything in JavaScript, nothing will work, of course. Yeah, nothing will work. So with the JavaScript, let me start from the top. So we have here some variables. We have declare some variables. We have the balance, inflow, outflow, the list, the form, the text, and the amount. Okay, with corresponding names. These corresponding names with the corresponding IDs. Okay. We will leave this to the end because this concerns the local storage. So now first let's start with add transaction. So I have here a function called add transaction with an E for event, and this is the event handler to prevent the default behavior of JavaScript. Then I'm checking if nothing is inside. So if nothing mainly is here, we want to display that error message. Okay, with a set timeout function. Okay, with 5 seconds, 5,000 milliseconds. Else we will continue, we'll carry on working. So this here, the meat, basically, everything that makes that application work. So we have transaction, which is the essential part of the whole JavaScript file. Transaction has 3 components. The ID, well, let's not use the word components. 3 main items, or it's an object. Okay, this transaction is an object with key value pair with ID to be equal to generate ID, and this is the function we're going to declare it here. And basically what generate ID does, it generates a random number, and generating a random number to be inserted in that mainly the generate ID is used to generate that button. I'll show you how in a moment. Okay, so that's that, the ID. Then the text with the text.value, which we defined here, text.value, and the amount plus amount.value. Okay, don't use it without the plus because it won't work. Need to add plus amount.value. Then we want the transactions.push, and we have a transaction inside that add transaction DOM, update values, all of that. Okay, we will leave all of that for the moment. Next let me show you the generate ID. So generate random ID, it's a simple function that uses the random method. It's a built-in method to generate a random number. Okay, and just any number above 1000 will be okay. I don't think you will keep track of more than 1000 items, but you got the idea. Next we have transactions history. So the history was inserted down here, but let me show you before that. So below here we are starting the application. So this is the initiation of the app. So we start the app by saying that the list, it's a function called start, and we are using that start function also here in removing transaction by ID. So starting the app is at the bottom, keep that in mind. Okay, back to our transactions history. So we have a function called add transaction DOM, and it takes one parameter, which is a transaction. So first we need to get the sign. So we are declaring a variable called sign, and we're basically saying that we want the transaction variable, and we are accessing the amount, and we're checking if the amount is less than 0, then it's essentially negative, else it's a positive sign. And we have also another variable called item, and we want to create for that item an element of li, because all that is ul, and inside it the li's. Okay, so this is the item. The item is the li basically. Then we want to assign a class to that li. So we'll take that item and we will say classlist.add, and we'll take the transaction amount. Again, if less than 0, then it's a minus. We'll give it a class of minus, else plus. And I've used that, basically the minus and the plus, to get that hovering effect, the gray color, also the font, also that bottom, the border bottom here, this line. So this is quite important if you want to do that, and also to check for checking, of course. Okay, then I'm taking that item and I want to get inner HTML using that backticks, because this is ES6, basically ES6, using this backticks and variables in contrast to ES5, the concatenation. Okay, so this is simply I'm pretty sure some of you know this, the $sign, and inside that it's the variable. Okay, so we have the transaction.text. Where's the transaction? Here, .text, and we want also the sign, which is here, minus or positive, and math.absolute. This is a built-in function to get the absolute number, transaction.amount. And then after, I want to create or insert a button, which is this button here, and that's the role of the transaction.id or get what was called generate ID function, which is here. Okay, so button with a class of delete-button, and on click I want to remove transaction, and this is a function. We will define it below, and inside that remove function I want to pass the transaction ID. Okay, and writing X. You can make it X big like that. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so that's that. And then we have the list, which is the list node, and we're appending a child of item. So each item we are appending to the list. Okay, and don't forget that the list up we have defined in the variables. The list is the get element by ID, the list, which is the dynamic below here, below the history, this right here, which is this essentially. Okay, so what else do we have? So we have created that history. Then we want to update the balance, inflow and outflow, everything here in that card. So we have a function called update values, and this update values function, we are declaring a variable called amounts, and this amounts variable will be set to transactions.map. So we are using the higher order functions like map, reduce, filter, so all these, but we're not using everything here. Using just map, we have reduce and we have filter. I think there is set also, not set. We have reduce, map, filter. I don't remember the others. Okay, so basically map, what's doing, it's looping over the transactions and returning. So we're passing transaction as a parameter, and we want to return transaction.amount. This is the arrow function, the ES6 standard. And if we use it, that we don't use return word. So this is, we assume that we want to return the transaction.amount. Okay, so again, we're looping over the transactions list, and we are returning the transaction amount. Next, we have a total variable, which is set to amounts. We're using this variable right here. We are using that amounts to reduce, and reduce is a very interesting and important higher order function that accumulates stuff. And remember always that reduce has two parameters. The first is where, and the second is when. Okay, not when, what. Okay, where and what. Okay, so the first parameter is where. So where I want to accumulate in balance. Okay, here this one. And the value, which is this parameter right here, is what? So I want the value of the amount. I want to accumulate the every value in this amounts and accumulate it inside the balance. And again, using the arrow function, and I want to return that, or I want to append the value, each value, to that balance. So we have a third. So now we have a third. Basically, we have a second because we wanted only the total, but in order to get the total, we needed the amounts. Okay, so we have the income and expense, and they are pretty much the same, except that we are filtering the value, and we are checking for values greater than 0 because it's income, and here is less than 0. And we want to reduce or to accumulate in that balance, just to append each value in that balance to accumulate it. Okay, here also the same, we want to accumulate, but we multiply by -1 because it's negative, it's expense. And like I said, you can also add investment, you can do the same, and you can add the same. You can really expand this budget app to be bigger. Then we want to get inner text for the balance, the inflow, and the outflow. This is essentially here. This is the balance, the inflow, and the outflow. And we want to get our new results, the total, the income, and the expense, just to update. Okay, so this is updating the balance, inflow, and outflow basically. Then we want to remove the transaction by ID, so we have another function called remove transaction, and takes parameter of ID, and we're saying that transactions, we are setting it to filter each transaction and to check if the transaction.id, the corresponding ID, doesn't equal to ID. Okay, then we want to remove that on click. Okay, then we want to update the local storage, which is a function not declared yet, so we will declare it here. And this basically what it says is it's setting the transactions. So we have a get item and set item. So we are setting that the transactions, and we're using the stringify just to serialize this. Basically what it does, it serializes the data, the JavaScript object, to a JSON string for the local storage to read. And even I've tweeted yesterday, take a look at that. What I said is JSON.parse is used for parsing data. I've shown that they are the complete opposite of each other, parse and stringify. Okay, so JSON.parse is used for parsing data that was received as JSON, and it deserializes a JSON string into a JavaScript object. Okay, and in contrast to that, we are stringifying. So we're taking the data which is inside, which is an object basically inside JavaScript, and we want to convert it to be JSON string. And to do that, we're using .stringify. So it's used to create a JSON string out of an object or array, serializes JavaScript object into a JSON string. I made a tweet yesterday on that. Okay, so yeah, this is to update the local storage. And you remember I told you, wait, we will use it later. So I have to get the transactions first. It needs to be on the top. And const local storage transactions will be equal to json.parse, like I've said now seconds ago, local storage.get item transactions. So all the transactions which are inside, just hold on here, inside, it's in the application. Just 1 second. Okay, so everything here, the transactions which are here with an ID, text, and amount, like we have defined. So to bring that information, to get the information, we are using the parse. Okay, so we're using JSON.parse. We're getting all transactions to be read inside our DOM here. And the opposite below, .json.stringify. And we're passing the transactions to set it, to store it, in other words, to store that data we are entered inside the local storage. So we are getting data, we're getting item and setting item, simply. Then last but not least, we want to start the app. So we are creating, which is here, which is this start. And to start the app, we want to clear the list. So where's the list? This list right here. List.inner.html equal to 0. Otherwise, it will continue on the same line. So we want to clear that first. Then we are we are basically looping with a for each loop over transactions to add transaction DOM. And add transaction DOM is another function. And update values. So add transaction, which is the function that we have created above. So form.add event listener submit. So on click, we are adding everything inside here. And add transaction is what we started with, our main function, this. Okay, hope that was clear. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And again, feel free to improve upon that app. I would really be happy if you will share with me your ideas. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and be well.